Hey everybody, welcome to this year's Homeschooling Global Summit 2020. Rejoining us this year is Peggy Webb. Peggy, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us again this year.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be back and to see how the Homeschooling Global Summit has grown over 1 year. It's going to be an exciting year for everybody, especially with all the circumstances surrounding kids learning at home for whatever reason.
Absolutely. It's crazy to think like last year was just this niche audience, and this year is, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people around the world, been exposed to homeschooling, for want of a better word, and could be asking questions about that. So this is what it's all about. And I think you've got an amazing angle with what you do. So could you tell us, actually, for those that didn't see you last year and are new to the summit, could you tell us a little bit about West River and what you do at West River?
Okay. Of course, I'd be happy to. You can see from our virtual background, that's our website, West River Academy, and we are accredited, we're international, and we serve kids of all ages from grades kindergarten up through 12th grade, or whatever you call it in the country you're in. And as you can see from the banner, it says freedom starts here, turning life experiences into academic credit. So that's really what we're all about. The key word being freedom. We want kids to have the freedom to learn in the way that they want to. Sometimes it's called unschooling or self-directed learning or interest-based learning, but we want to support the parents, to support the kids, to learn what is exactly right for them. So it's the growth of the child, and I think the emphasis on children has been removed from the school system. It's all about money and power and control and so forth. And it's not about the child anymore. So when we say it's about the child, it's a 180-degree turn, which is so unnatural. But it should be like, why is the child here? What does he come to this planet to do right now? We want him to go inside to find out what his heart is telling him, what his soul is speaking to him about. Why is he here? And usually what the children are interested in is a good clue. All right. So we want them to pursue those interests. We have, as a school, have been in business since 1993. We're very well established. We have offices in Colorado and California. We act as a private school. So rather than enrolling as a homeschooler through your school district, you can just get out of the system completely. You can enroll with us as a private school student. And then in general, depending on the state and the country, in general, you will not have to fulfill any homeschool requirements for your state, including filing notices of intent or reporting, quarterly reports, things like that. You just won't have to do. Now, I qualify that because some states, such as New York and Pennsylvania, are very strict, and whether you're with us or not, it doesn't matter. But the beauty of being with us through high school is that you'll then get your high school diploma, which is really great to have a diploma from a private accredited international school. And you'll also have a 4-year transcript, which we will make with you when you're done. And then we'll send that on to colleges for admission. So basically turning life experience into academic credit means that you go about your business, you pursue your interests, keep good notes so that you have something to refer to. And then when it comes time to make a transcript, we can take a look at all the life experiences that you've had, whether it's traveling all over the world, meeting different people, having college experiences, doing Galileo platform, for example, the self-directed learning platform that was born from this summit last year, or anything else you do, mentorships, activities, hiking, doing formal sports, formal music, all of these things would go on to your transcript. And so that's the beauty, I think, of our, you might say, umbrella school. It acts as an umbrella. It protects you, but it also collects everything that you've done and represents it with courses and credits. And then the grades are done subjectively because it's all about, you knowing your children and how they're doing in certain areas. And it basically becomes a ticket of passage to the next level. So it basically is telling the college, hey, we're ready. We've done everything that we need to do to prepare for a college education. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I got started in this when my children were very small, back in the 80s. And I unschooled 3 daughters, and they all started working for West River Academy ultimately. And so it's been quite the family journey into the whole unschooling arena when it was very unknown. John Holt was a major leader, and now Pat Franga has taken that over. And a lot of others have come on board to help people understand what it is to allow your children to grow naturally. In fact, we're coining the term natural learning. That's what it's really about. So does that give you more than a nutshell?
Yeah, that's perfect. There's a lot of questions actually I wanted to ask about that, and you kind of answered one of them already, and it was like, I wanted to ask, what made you start this school? It seemed to me as though you're scratching your own itch.
Yeah. When my oldest daughter was a baby, I was a teacher of English as a second language, and I had just returned from Japan, where my husband and I, who was Japanese, he and I set up a language school. And so we were kind of used to doing our own thing, creating teaching materials, helping students to learn English. And we came back to the States, and I was asked by the University of Toledo in Ohio if I would come and teach ESL. And my baby was like a week old. And I said, I'm going to do that. So I garnered some friends and said, so how would you like to watch my baby while I go teach for a little bit? And so one of my friends had 3 daughters, and she started to homeschool her oldest one. And it was back in the 80s, and people didn't know about that. And so I said to her, how did you do that? She goes, well, I don't know. I just looked in the library and I found some laws about it, and it seemed like I could do it. This was the state of Ohio. And so I took my daughter out of Montessori and just decided I would. And I said, well, that sounds really intriguing. I just have a baby, but I'd be interested. What do I do? And she said, well, just go to the library and read all the books by John Holt. And that will pretty much tell you what it's all about. And I did. And as I started reading everything John Holt said, such as fish swim and humans learn, I thought, well, that's natural, right? Fishing or swimming is natural to fish. Humans learn. Okay, this makes so much sense to me. Why would I do anything different? It was one of those things where you read something that you've never seen before, but inside, wow, I've always known that, right? It just hit a chord. It just resonated. And I thought, wow, I could do this. So then I started learning more. And she sort of mentored me through because her 3 daughters were older, and I could just watch and see what her environment looked like and kind of move along her path until I understood it. And I think that's what it's all about with unschooling. It's so opposite of being in school or having a curriculum at home, that you kind of need someone's hand to hold, as you get started, because it's sort of a mind twister. It's sort of presents cognitive dissonance in a way, because you've been brainwashed. And now the brainwashing is called programming. And so what we do with unschooling is we also do deschooling, which is kind of deprogramming our mind from a certain way of thinking about how learning happens. So that's kind of how I got started.
And it's so true. And there's a lot of empathy, I think, from like the homeschooling community, that those that are already doing it or have done it in the past, that with the pandemic at the moment, putting everybody into a lockdown situation and being forced into homeschooling, not really understanding that isn't what it's like, that's more like school at home, and and still being in that mindset, like, they haven't had a chance to deprogram or deschool because they didn't know it was going to happen. All of a sudden schools are closed, kids are at home, they need teaching. Complete anxiety, total stress. I can't wait for them to get back to school, even though the kids might even seem happier. They're sleeping longer, like they're more relaxed, they're possibly even learning more. What could you say to people that are in a position right now where, like, they might want to consider this, but just fear the consequences of not being able to keep up with like this curriculum or the way that we've been brainwashed, as you said so rightly, into what we think is learning.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that happened to me back in the day because it was so unusual. Homeschooling itself was unusual, but then, and that's basically school at home, where it's something you find a curriculum and you administer it to your children. It's kind of like school, but you're doing it at home. Unschooling is the hard thing because that's the opposite. So to get your mind around that may take a little bit of time. But basically, I tell parents that if you're a good parent, you can be a good homeschooling parent. You can be a good unschooling parent for the most part. Because when your kids were very little, you didn't give them talking lessons when they said their first word, right? You didn't give them walking lessons when they started to show an interest in standing. It was a natural thing. Like you would just cheer. Oh, look what Johnny just did. He just said dada. Look what Johnny did. He took his first step. Oh, he got on a tricycle. Oh, he's doing this. So we were cheerleaders for our children when they were little. And then all of a sudden they go into a school setting and now it's not about them anymore. And it's not about, yay, your teacher says, look what you did. It's more like, do this. Okay, now I give you a grade. So children are very malleable. They learn quickly to conform to what's expected of them. And then their love of learning kind of droops and so forth. So, but what I did with my daughter when she was very young and I was on this unschooling path, she got to be about 6 years old and she wanted to get on the school bus. And I thought, nah, that's not a good idea. So I said, well, we will do what they do at school. How would that be? And she, oh yeah, okay. So we got out these old McGuffey readers from back in the 1800s and the Ray's arithmetics, and we used popsicle sticks for the math. And we had like 2 hours in the morning where we would do math and we would do reading. And it would go for 2 hours. And at the end, we'd be done. And I just watched how this happened. Well, after 2 weeks, I could see she was losing attention and she was getting distracted. And I kept saying, well, this is what they do in school. And by the end of 2 weeks, I said, so this is what they do in school. And we're doing just like what they do in school. Is this what you'd like to continue? And she said, no, I don't want to do this anymore. I said, okay. So we put away, all this stuff and said, okay, then, well, what do you want to do? And she's, so then we got into what she really wanted to do. But then there is always the question, well, what if we do this? And what if she fails? What if I fail her in educating her properly? Whose fault is that? How can I speak to her as an adult and say, I'm sorry, I led you down the wrong path and you failed and now I have to support you the rest of your life? I mean, that's our worst fears, right? That our kids are going to fail. It's our fault. We have to, and we're going to have to be responsible. So what I did at the end of her first grade year is I made this amazing portfolio, a big notebook, and I had pictures of all the places we'd been, and I had lists of books that she's read and all the activities that we did. And I just spent hours putting it together. And when it was done, I read it. And I just was like, wow, we did so much that we never could have done if we'd been in school. And can she read? Yeah, she's reading great, all on her own. And she's reading naturally. You know how when kids learn how to read, sometimes they'll go, see Dick. Dick is with Spot. They play. But she was reading, see Dick, Dick's with Huck, with good intonation because I've been reading to her. And then she just would read the same way. So she didn't develop that I've been taught in school to read kind of intonation. And I was just so impressed with what she learned. And that was the first and the last time I ever put together a portfolio. I just proved to myself that this child is learning so much more by not being in an enclosed box for 6 hours a day, being told this is normal, being told you have to learn everything at the same time as every other kid, and one teacher is responsible for teaching it all. It's just not normal. And when I convinced myself how much she learned, I gained confidence to know that I couldn't hurt her. There's no way I could fail. There's no way she could fail. So that's why, back to square one, that's what I say is, if you're a good parent, you can be a good homeschooling parent or unschooling parent, because you care about your children. That's all it takes, caring. I don't have to know everything, but if my child wants to learn engineering and I haven't a clue, I will find somebody that can show her what engineering is all about, and maybe find a mechanical engineer or a civic engineer who is employed as such and say, hey, would you like to come over to dinner and talk to us about your profession? So there's so many resources out in the world, and all I have to do as a parent is to help to connect my children with those resources. So that takes the stress and the burden off of one or two parents to provide everything. And if we don't do it, they're going to fail. No, you just introduce them to things. And if they're interested, let them take off. Let them tell you by their interests. And the interest will produce excellence, because schools work on deficiencies. What you're not good at, they try to make you work on. But with unschooling, we see the world as balanced because everybody in the world has different talents, and you put those together and you get balance. But to try to have every child know everything and work on deficiencies, how insane is that, right? Work on your strengths. Let's put all of our strengths together in the world and make it a better place for everybody.
It does seem like, when you phrase it that way, it just does seem so kind of basic. Like, it's no way to organize a society with, okay, we've got X amount of tens or hundreds of millions of kids. Let's all teach them the same thing.
Makes no sense, right? I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense for the controllers, right? Because they get the money, they have the power, and they get the control over little people, and that's all they need. Then it's not about the kids, as I said, it's about all the other things. And to do that, you need to get kids that are the same age, basically the same abilities, in the same place, doing the same thing. And to save money, you don't want 30 teachers for 30 kids, right? You need one teacher for 30 kids. Now you've got a business to run. But the children are sacrificed when, ironically, schools are supposed to be for children to learn. It's everything but that, isn't it?
It truly is. And I still think like the hardest thing for us as parents to adapt to, because, I've fallen into the trap myself. It's very, very difficult to put your trust in. And, I spoke with Pat Ferenger about this. He brought this up. Is like, putting your trust into the fact that your child is learning all the time, even if they're sitting on the sofa for 30, 40 minutes, and it might not look as though they're doing much, and they might be coloring in a book, or even just watching something on television, or playing with a toy. That is still a form of learning. But we are so conditioned to think, if you're not sat at a desk with a book open, with at least two books open, one to study from and one to write into, then you're not learning.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot to be said for downtime, because there's another book written by Grace Llewellyn, and it's called The Teenage Liberation Handbook. And the first chapter is called The Vacation, right? And she basically says, when a child comes out of school, they need a break. Let them have time to just gel, to lie on their bed, to look at the ceiling, to think about things, not be on their electronic stuff, because that's distracting, but to really, it's about us and who are we. We have to go inside. It's our heart, it's our soul. That's what we need to find out. That's how we find out who we are. We have to have quiet time. We have to have time to contemplate, to think, to ponder, to think bigger than our little day-to-day life, to think about the universe, like what's out there, where do we come from, where are we going, what's happening here, and why, and what can I do to help, and what's my role here in this lifetime. And you don't get time to do that when you're constantly busy doing work for other people so you can be graded and evaluated. So it's so important to have that quiet time. And that's valuable. I don't know that you can actually turn it into an academic credit, but you probably, whatever you're thinking about could evolve into, an invention, or a brainstorm of, I want to do this. And then that becomes credit worthy. But it's really important. You're absolutely right. Children need quiet time, and sometimes making that transition from school where you're told what you have to do, and unschool where you're told it's up to you. It's up to you to manage your time. It's up to you to decide what you want to do with your life. It's a huge responsibility, and it's a huge change in the way the child has been thinking. I just interviewed one of our graduates from Chile. His name is Jürgen. I hope you'll take a look at it. And he's now 25. He joined West River Academy when he was 12, he and his younger sister. And just to give you a little preview, no spoiler alert, he said the hardest thing for him was when he left school and had to decide what he was going to do. There was so much downtime, and he played his video games and he watched television, and he was getting dissatisfied that he wasn't doing anything productive. He wasn't really moving forward. So between himself being dissatisfied and his parents wanting to push him into doing something more productive, he said he finally transitioned into saying, I have to turn this stuff off and I have to think about my future. Now, this was a 12-year-old, that got to this place of thinking, I just really have to get serious about my life here. I've had plenty of downtime. I've been playing and I'm not sure it's been too productive. But now I've really got to think about it. So he started slowly to apply himself to what he felt he wanted to do. And he thought, well, I'll be an architect maybe because my dad is. And he's tried that and he didn't like it. Then he decided a little bit later that he wanted to go into medicine. So he started to do that. This was later, as he started the university. And he decided he didn't like that either. But then he went, how about animals? Because he's always loved animals. So now he's studying veterinary science, and that's what he thinks he's really enjoying. And he said, here I am, 25, and his younger sister knew when she was 10 or younger that she wanted to be an architect and an artist. She went, as soon as she got out of school, she went boom, right into her love. And I used to get pictures that she drew and paintings that she did and amazingly detailed architectural drawings. And she was a great student of Frank Lloyd Wright, just gobbled up all of his art. And so she then graduated from West River and went directly into the university. She got, one of 52 spots in the university. And now she's in Germany. She's studying there. She's learned the German language. She just knew from day one, this is what I would do if I had all this time to myself. So Jürgen speaks about the difference between himself taking time to try to figure things out and his sister. Now, one is not better than the other. It was perfect for what Jürgen did, and it was perfect for what his sister did, because they're different people. So it was really great that Jürgen, as an older brother, could not be jealous. He's like, yeah, my sister's great. Look, here's the picture she did. He's so proud of her. But that doesn't mean that he's down on himself because he didn't do what she did. And that's the beauty. However you choose to homeschool or unschool your children, don't expect the same thing. Even in the same family, they're going to be different. Some will do things that you think are productive and really good, and others will be what you might call lazy. But don't worry. You just have to trust that in the end, they're going to be kids that have confidence, that have responsibility. That's important, that the children take responsibility for their decisions. So it's not like, Mom, you homeschooled me and now it's all your fault that I'm a mess. It's not like that. It's you're taking responsibility as a child for the decisions that you make. And that the parents have to be sure that they are helping the children to learn that they need to own their decisions. And if they make a mistake in their mind, fine, you made a mistake. So what? Just do something else. The world will not end because you made a bad choice at one point. So I think these things are very important for beginning homeschoolers or people just thinking about it. to keep in mind. You're going to make mistakes. Your kids are going to make mistakes, and it's okay, and it's
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about, if anyone's watching this and they're wondering, wow, this all sounds great. What is it exactly that West River do, and how can people find out more about you and the kind of courses that you offer?
Well, first of all, go to the website, westriveracademy.com, and read everything there. If you want to enroll, there's a little yellow Enroll Now button on the homepage. You click on that and you'll create an account for yourself, and then you'll enroll your children. The fee is $375 for an annual enrollment for one child. And for a second or third child or more in the family, there's an additional $50 fee. So that's your full enrollment for the full year. Now, after you enroll and we transfer records from wherever you were before to us, then you're free. Now, that means that if you need our help, we can provide it, but we don't impose any curriculum or any learning materials or methodology on you, right? We walk the talk. We want you to be free. So we're not going to say, and now do this, right? Makes no sense. So we want you to be free, but we are not going to let you go in the middle of an ocean when you can't swim. If you need our help, you can sign up for a consultation. I will work with you. Sometimes we do a Zoom or a speakerphone arrangement where the kids are involved. And I'll do some talking to the children and say, if you had $1 million and could do anything right now, what would that be? And start to find out like what's really deep within you that excites you about life, because that's where we want to start. And then we can talk about, well, what's your day going to look like? What time are you going to get up? And then what are you going to do? And have breakfast? Well, who's going to cook it? And then what are you going to do? And so we kind of can talk about what your day will look like. And it doesn't mean you do that for 10 years. It means you do it to start. And if a parent feels like you need to have them do some kind of structure, don't think you're a bad person for that. It's natural, because you have to wean yourself from an old way and gradually come into a new way, but come into it gradually and naturally, not by forcing it on yourself and then failing and getting frustrated and giving up and putting your kids back in school. So be patient with yourselves and be patient with your children to develop a kind of a daily rhythm so that you move through the day in a pleasant way where you're supporting each other. But also, you as parents, you can also require that the kids be part of maintaining your home. Like, just because they have freedom to learn doesn't mean that they can just not make their bed or not help with the dishes or not help with the home maintenance. They can just sit around while everybody else does the work to keep the family going. There are people that and families that maybe choose that, but sometimes it's not felt to be too healthy, and the children need to learn responsibility within their family, because the whole idea is how to function in society, as family units. So that's just maybe a way to think about getting started. And then with us, at the end of the year, if you need a transcript, then you can order one. We don't recommend it unless you really need one, because you can have a transcript for as many years as you would like to put on it, say at the end of elementary school or the end of middle school or the end of high school. Or sometimes for different governments, they feel more comfortable if they have one to show just in case, or sometimes they do have to show it to school authorities. So transcripts are always available, and that's where we will ask you to put down your own course names and put down your own grade, and we'll help you to put it in a good final format with our advice, but ultimately you're the one that will approve the transcript for whatever purpose you have. And that's really it. During the year, if you need our help, you can call us or write to us or sign up for a consultation. And if you don't, we don't bother you. So that's completely up to you. You can choose curriculum too. That's fine too. You can buy a curriculum and then start with the curriculum. And then as the children say, hey, can I do this instead of that? Then back off the curriculum a little bit. So that's more of a gradual approach. Start with something formal and then gradually move to something less formal as the children get used to maintaining, managing their time, and the parents are comfortable with it.
And am I right
Is there
in? Yeah, no, I think that's all good. I just wanted to ask a little bit more around that, because there's still this overhanging fear for many of us about, you know, certification and getting this, whatever it might be, depending on which part of the world you are and what exams you're expected to have by that particular government at the time. Am I right in thinking that you serve the homeschool community on like a one-off basis as well? If somebody wanted to come to you and engage with you and say, well, my son or daughter, for example, can speak another language perfectly because they're either bilingual or they've lived in a different country for X amount of years. What can we do about getting a transcript together and perhaps a diploma or some kind of certification? And that could be the same thing for a musical instrument or whatever it is that the child can actually do and probably does deserve to be certified for. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, the word certification is used in many other countries. We just call it making a transcript. So, because we don't certify anything, we produce a document which says, here's the courses that you studied and the grades, A, B, C, you know, pick one. And then if you're a high school student, we have credits. So like a year of history would be 1 credit. And we put that on our transcripts because we're an American school and we issue American transcripts. But the idea is that, for example, if you're in a country where you study the same subject every year, like in many South American countries, you'll study biology, chemistry, physics, math every single year, then that's fine. We can put in grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, biology, 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 chemistry, 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 right? Because the idea for the transcript is who's going to see it, in what country. And if it's a university in another country, then we want the transcript. The language of the transcript is English, okay? Because obviously we're an American school. So the language is English, but the course names can be based on what the university in your country is looking for to see that you are qualified to study at the university level. Then once we have the transcript done, we will notarize it and send it to the Secretary of State of Colorado for what's called an apostille. And for countries that are members of the Hague Convention, the apostille is the way to go. If you're not a member of the Hague Convention, it's something else called legalization, and it requires an extra step of going to the embassy of your country for validation. But for the most part, it's the Hague Convention countries. And then so your transcript and your high school diploma will have apostilles attached to them. Those documents will be presented to the Ministry of Education, and the ministry will then validate the documents, which means that the public university of your country will allow you to enter that university. Now, that's not always the case, because some ministries of education will not accept our documents and will not validate. And we have no way of knowing until we try. So we can tell you what our track record has been with certain countries. Like, we know that Mexico validates, Colombia, Argentina, Ecuador, and we know certain countries don't because we've tried it, such as Costa Rica. And then in Europe, we've had not success, except with the UK. But Western Europe is very severe, and we don't have many students there because we can't get anything validated. We have a lot of students from Romania and Hungary. Surprisingly, their countries are very severe. It makes homeschooling illegal, actually, but they do it anyway. And they want the protection by having a transcript, which does have an apostille, even though we know that the Romanian Ministry of Education will not validate. The kids cannot go to college, but the kids want it anyway. Now, we had one student in Romania. She couldn't get into the Romanian university, so she ended up applying to a university in the US called Ubiquity, which is an online university. We sent the transcript to them and they accepted her, and she's been studying from Romania online in the United States. So, there's a lot of things that you can do. And that, as I said, Hungary, we have a lot of students there and they do not validate as far as we know. But these people want freedom. Sometimes they're young, the kids are young and they want to get out of the system and they want freedom. It's such a severe strict, dangerous system in some cases, a lot of bullying, a lot of violence. They want freedom and they want safety. And so they're out of school and they don't really know yet what they're going to do afterwards. But, university is not the be all and end all of education. In fact, it's becoming less and less desirable and more expensive. And a lot of kids graduating from university are not better off than a kid graduating from high school in terms of job opportunities. And now, with the world being as it is, you're pretty much better off being an entrepreneur, like create your own stuff. And as an unschooler, that's what you're doing anyway. You're just developing all your creative abilities. And lots of kids will start off with businesses when they're teenagers. So did I answer your question in a roundabout way?
You did. Yeah, you did. And you're so right about being entrepreneurial and starting your own businesses, because it just gives you that freedom to learn and chase your passion and, to be creative. And which I think we both agree, if school excels at anything, and, I say this a little tongue in cheek, but it has a very high success rate at killing the love of learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the greatest strength of school. I mean, of any kind of forced learning, Albert Einstein has a quote in the foreword of a book where it says that if you force feed a pastured, grazing animal, you can kill the love of learning. So it's the coercion. It's not that horses don't naturally graze, but if you make them eat the grass, they're going to turn their head away. And that's the same thing. If we try to force our children into doing something which is natural to the human being, we will succeed in killing. Well, I don't say kill, but it's like a pilot light, and the pilot light gets lower and lower. It's still there and it can be fanned, and you want to fan it when they're done with that coercion. And then it will, take off again. But if you just keep pressuring, coercing, that love of learning is so hard to find. It will take time to bring back. And when it does come back, for different kids, it's a different rate. Some kids that are actually doing the worst in school are the best at homeschooling, because once they get out of the system, they just, boom, they blossom. It's like, oh, I've just wanted to do this for so long. Now I finally can. And other kids where school has been more successful, those kids' love of learning is pretty squelched, and it may take a lot of time to bring them back. And then there's the kids that perform so well in school. They were just great little robots and they learned everything and they did great at testing. And you take them out of school and they don't know what to do and they can't survive. So every child is different, in terms of how they rebound from a school situation and how they survive it, and how they thrive in it. To some kids thrive to outward appearance, but sometimes they thrive and they go to a great college and they get into a great corporation and they go up the corporate ladder and they're miserable from day one, but they got plenty of money and stuff to show for what they've done. So do you want your kids just being successful with a bunch of money and a corporate job and a corporate ladder? We want to produce kids that are thriving, happy, confident inside, in their heart, in their soul. That's what we hope for with Freedom Starts Here. We want the freedom to bring them to a place where they are happy, healthy, thriving young adults.
And to round out the conversation, I just want to point out as well that there's a lot of narrative in the mainstream media being fed into the homes and into the hearts and the brains of people about, the lost generation, or these kids that are, going to be left behind because they didn't have this particular 6 weeks in school. And it's such a false message. And what's the downside of trying homeschooling, giving it a run for a year? And in your experience, what do you generally see after 1 year of a homeschooled kid, how different they might be?
Well, if you give it a try, at the end of the year, you may put your kid back in school because you'll just say, not working, I didn't like it, he wasn't doing anything, not happy with it, or tried a curriculum, he didn't want to do it. You know, that happens. If you can get beyond that first year and give it a shot for the second year, give me a call and we'll have a consultation and say, hey, what happened and why do you think this didn't work? And I'll talk to the student, the child, and see what was going on with him and see if we can adjust. Sometimes the parents are so afraid of the child failing. They get so controlling and they make the child miserable and the child rebels and the parent puts on more pressure and it's just a spiral going downhill until they all throw up their hands and say, school of any kind is better than this. So if it's usually fear, as I say, if you can control your fear by reading books by John Holt and other unschooling types, checking into Galileo XP, educate yourself, and that will help to assuage the fear and the nervousness, the fear of failure. And if you can deschool yourself as a parent, you'll be a much more pleasant homeschooling parent to your children, right? And then they won't feel that stress and you'll be able to talk to them as equals, you know, not as I have to decide what to do and it's my responsibility and you have to do what I say or else we're all going to be in hot water. You know, it's more, I see you as a unique individual. How can I help you? What would you like to be doing? What would you like to be learning? You know, and you do have the backing of a school such as West River. So if you need that support, we can help you to come to some kind of you might say a beginning program of, as I said, how your daily life will look. And maybe let's say we'll do that for 3 months. And then after 3 months, check back in. Let's do another consultation. Let's see how it went. Let's see what we need to tweak, what worked, what didn't work. I can usually kind of see from that what the dynamic is, what's happening, and suggest that we tweak it a little bit and make it so it's more pleasant for people. But you know, if they can't do it and they want to go back to school, we can produce a transcript for them which show that they finished that year and can go into the next year. It's just a simple, you know, English, history, math, science, what grade you want to give. Schools are required to take children back and they get to choose the grade level. But if we present a transcript showing, for example, they completed grade 4, then they can put them back in school and they'll be at grade 5. So there's really no problem with trying it for a year and deciding, interesting experiment, no, and then putting them back in school. That happens. And that's going to happen a lot with this situation with the lockdown. I know in countries such as Ecuador, the schools are closed. There's absolutely nothing. There's nothing online. So we have gotten a flood of inquiries from Ecuador, but most of them are just looking for a school and online, a curriculum. They don't really get that there's another way. So a lot of them, we just say, this is what we do, and they leave. This is what we do, and they're gone because they don't want that. They want a school. As soon as school's open, kids are back there. So we're just filling a gap. But at least they're reaching out. And maybe down the road, they'll decide. If it's not right for them now, fine, you've come, you've gone. But now there's a lot of those kinds of inquiries from people who are just trying to figure out, what do I do with my kids? They're watching television all day. I have to make them do something. Maybe I'll put them in your school. Can you give them a curriculum? No. Okay, bye. So there's a lot of frustration over this whole thing, and people are finding their ways. You know, it's not easy. It's thrust upon them. Then there's some students who are families who are on the verge. They've been talking about homeschooling. They just haven't done it. And this is pushing them over the edge. And they're like, oh, I wanted to do it and now I'm going to try it. Can you help? And they're going to be very successful, most likely, because they just need a little nudge.
Precisely. And they can come into it without judgment. You know, that's a superpower for a new homeschooler to have this opportunity to say, right, well, we're homeschooling because we're doing the best for our child. We're finding, You know, we're exploring our choices, and this is what this summit is all about. It's not like to beat the drum of homeschool, it's to beat the drum of choice. There is a
Right.
choice.
Exactly.
And companies like West River are out there, and you guys have been around for so long, you know.
1993. Yeah. Yeah. Many years, almost 30. Well, 27,
That's
28.
amazing. I mean, we have a section of new companies that are coming out, you know, like the startups coming from Silicon Valley, and they're all exciting and whatever else. And it's great what's going on in the space, because there's going to be a lot more people that we need to accommodate.
Mm-hmm.
And like you say, everyone's different. They're all looking for different options, and they're being built by entrepreneurs who most likely were school dropouts themselves,
Yeah.
building schools or building online learning places. So I'm very optimistic for the next 10 years.
Now, something I'd like to tell you about, this is very recent, and I'm seeing this as a model down the road. We enroll what's called groups, right? So you're an administrator, you have a learning co-op, and you want to enroll them with West River so that you have some legality. Well, what I see happening, I was just contacted by a lady in Colorado who leads up an ice hockey organization. And she contacted me and she said, we've been offering this, getting the kids out of school so they can spend more time doing ice hockey. Now there's no school. So we're looking at forming a learning group, but we don't want to create a school. So what we want to do is have all these kids that are really interested in ice hockey be able to spend a lot of time playing their craft, improving their craft, their sport. And we also want to offer some learning platforms. So can you be our school, right? So I said, yeah, that's what we do. Let us do what we do best so you don't have to create a school. And you can devote yourself to those kids that want to add learning stuff, whatever it is and however it is, to their love, their passion of ice hockey. And so what I see happening, just pretend there were no schools. What would it have been like? People would have gotten together and said, oh, you're an engineer. Can you come and do a course for these group of kids and teach them about engineering? Whoever's interested. And, oh, you're good at, sewing clothing. Can you teach these kids how to sew? And so it's kind of like what Galileo's doing online. But then you have people who come together in these pockets, right, for different reasons, and they're doing a kind of learning. They're choosing it for what's good for their kids, and there's even different platforms for each kid in the group, to offer. And then we as a school are set up to enroll those kids and produce the transcripts or do whatever they need in that department. So I see that as something up and coming. Whether kids go back to school or schools are going to be different, there's no doubt about it. And it might be more of the same, but the idea that they've been out of school and some moms have been creatively thinking about, well, maybe I can do something that is better for my kids, then what's going to happen? And I see these co-ops coming together and doing some really cool stuff. And my mind is just going like, wow, what if this became education of the future?
Yeah, Peggy, imagine a life with no school. What would happen? I mean, it'd be complete anarchy out there, wouldn't it?
Well, look at how it was before school,
Right.
I mean, in the United States, these kids in Massachusetts Bay Colony were marched off to school at the point of a bayonet, I mean, that was compulsory attendance, the
That's
beginning of that.
that's the
But when
violence.
that didn't happen, the kids were out in the fields. It was agriculture. They were working. And when they had a chance, there'd be a little schoolhouse and they'd bring a teacher to come and teach them stuff, right? But that was what kind of a public thing. Before that, it was just tutors, right? And there were actually people say, well, what about kids that can't afford it, the private schooling? I learned through my study that there were actually little like homes in the town where these usually women were having the kids from poor homes come into their home, and she was teaching them. It was philanthropy. It was all done voluntarily. So these kids were getting educated. And if we hadn't had this compulsory attendance, there would have been just amazing growth in creative solutions for learning. I can't even imagine. It just blows my mind as to what could have been. And if schools disappeared from the face of the earth, what learning would look like for children. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
Creativity would just explode.
I completely agree with you. Completely agree with you. Well, Peggy, that's probably a great place to leave the interview. Thank you so much, as I said, for coming back and sharing all of your knowledge and your insights and explaining what you do at West River. I think it's brilliant.
Thank you, Daniel. Great to be here again, and look forward to the rest of the summit.
Thank you so much.